The grand hall of the Empire stretched wider than any human could imagine. Towering crystal columns reflected the pale light of 1,000 hovering lamps. At the center, a raised platform gleamed where the Empress sat, her presence commanding every eye. Nobles, generals, and dignitaries from across the stars filled the hall, their armor and robes glittering with authority. But amidst this display of power, one figure drew attention, not for grandeur but for contrast. Kalen, the human warborn, stood alone. His armor, worn and scratched from countless battles, clanked slightly as he shifted his weight. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, and most considered them weak, fragile, and ill-suited for the rigors of war. Kalen, however, had spent years proving that humans could endure and excel where others failed. Yet today none of that mattered. Princess Vera, daughter of the Empress, rose from her seat. Her presence was like fire, radiant, fierce, untouchable. She looked down at Kalen with a mixture of amusement and disdain. "A human," she said, her voice carrying across the hall. "Do you truly believe you belong among warriors?" Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some snorted. Others whispered. Kalen met her gaze steadily, refusing to let her words shake him. He had faced death countless times, fought monsters from beyond the stars, and survived storms that would have crushed alien bodies like paper. Vera stepped closer. "I have watched your battles," she continued, "and I have seen your so-called valor. But tell me, human, when the enemy is real, when fire burns and steel strikes, what makes you think you can lead? You are fragile. You are small. You will break." The hall erupted with laughter. Aliens of all shapes and sizes, with limbs and eyes far different from Kalen's, pointed and jeered. Some barked in amusement. Others hissed in mockery. For a moment, Kalen felt the weight of the crowd. The centuries of prejudice and the undeniable truth of being a human among aliens who had ruled the stars for millennia. And yet, he did not falter. He slowly reached for the clasps of his armor. The crowd's laughter turned to gasps. Every eye in the hall followed his movements as he unclasped the heavy chest plate, lifted the shoulder guards, and finally let his armor clatter to the ground. The sound echoed like a drumbeat across the hall, a challenge, a statement, and a rejection of the chains that bound him. "I do not need this," Kalen said, his voice calm but strong. "I do not need steel to prove my worth. I do not need swords or shields or the approval of those who measure strength by appearance alone." The Empress's face remained impassive, but Vera's expression shifted. A flicker of surprise, then irritation. "You dare to speak to me like this?" she demanded. "I do not speak to you," Kalen replied. "I speak to everyone who believes courage can be worn like armor. My strength is not in what covers my body, but what shapes my mind, my heart, and my will." The hall went silent. Even the murmuring nobles paused, unsure how to respond. Aliens were not accustomed to such defiance from humans, or anyone for that matter. Vera's eyes narrowed, but Kalen did not flinch. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the massive doors at the far end of the hall, the gates that led to the uncharted frontier. "The wilderness beyond the Empire's reach. I will go," he said, taking a step forward. "And I will prove, not to you, not to anyone here, but to myself, what it truly means to be human." Whispers filled the hall again. Many assumed he would never return. The frontier beyond the Empire's borders was known as the Dead Zone, a region of storms, collapsed cities, and untold dangers. No soldier had survived it without the aid of machines, shields, or massive armies. And Kalen walked forward alone, unarmed and without his armor. The princess, unable to hide her frustration, raised her voice. "Coward, you will die out there. You disgrace your species, and worse, you disgrace yourself." Kalen paused at the threshold of the hall. For the first time, he looked back, not with anger, not with fear, but with resolve. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "but when I return, it will not be as a man seeking approval. It will be as a human who knows what courage truly is." He stepped through the doors. The air beyond was cold and sharp. A harsh wind whipped against his bare, armorless form, carrying with it the scent of dust, iron, and forgotten battles. The sky above was streaked with colors unfamiliar to human eyes, violet storms clashing with golden clouds, lighting up a landscape scarred by ancient wars. Kalen's mind was sharp, alert. Every sound, every movement, every shadow could be a threat. Yet he did not hesitate. He walked forward into the unknown, guided only by instinct, courage, and a determination to show what humanity was capable of. The Dead Zone tested him immediately. Loose stones shifted beneath his feet. Strange creatures scuttled in the distance, and remnants of ancient machines lay scattered like bones across the landscape. But Kalen observed and adapted. Where others would panic, he calculated. Where others would flee, he pressed on. Every step was a lesson, every encounter a small victory. He found shelter in a hollowed-out structure, remnants of an alien city long forgotten. Inside, he lit a small fire using methods any human would recognize, not magical tech or alien tools. The fire's warmth was comforting, but it also reminded him of home, of the people who had believed in him and those who had doubted him. Kalen ate simple rations and tended his minor wounds. Alone, he reflected on the events in the hall. The princess's words still echoed, but they no longer hurt. They fueled him. Humans, he realized, were often underestimated. They were smaller, physically weaker, and far from the dominant species in many parts of the galaxy. But what humans lacked in brute strength, they made up for with resilience, creativity, and adaptability, and Kalen intended to prove it. Night fell, and the stars above the dead zone were unlike any he had ever seen. They were brighter, sharper, as if the universe itself were watching him take his first steps into a new destiny. He lay down on the cold ground, staring at the vast sky, and felt something he had not felt in years: freedom. He had shed his armor, faced ridicule, and walked into the unknown. Tomorrow the dead zone would test him further. Creatures, storms, and ancient machines awaited, but Kalen was ready, for in every human heart he knew there was a spark that could burn brighter than any alien steel, endure longer than any storm, and survive against impossible odds. And he would carry that spark forward, wherever the dead zone or the galaxy tried to push him. As the first winds of the coming storms whispered through the ruins, Kalen closed his eyes. The laughter of the hall seemed distant now, irrelevant. What mattered was the path ahead, the challenges yet to come, and the proof that humanity, even alone, could shine among the stars. The first part of his journey had begun, and with it, the legend of the human warborn. The sun rose slowly over the dead zone, painting the jagged landscape in sharp oranges and purples. Kalen stood atop a ridge, looking down at the valley below. Crumbling ruins stretched across the land like the bones of a long-forgotten world. Twisted metal and shattered stone jutted from the earth, remnants of battles that had occurred centuries before his time. Every step he took would need care. The dead zone was known for more than its history. It was a place where nature and machines had collided, creating dangers unlike any conventional battlefield. Acid rain could fall without warning. Scavenger creatures stalked the wind-blown plains, and rogue machines, once dormant, sometimes roamed as if they remembered old orders. Kalen adjusted the small pack on his back. Inside, he carried only what was essential: rations, a water filter, a small knife, and a few tools to build basic shelter. Humans were not naturally strong like many aliens, but they could adapt, and Kalen intended to survive not with raw power, but with observation, intelligence, and patience. He descended into the valley carefully. Rocks crumbled beneath his boots, and the wind carried faint whispers that could have been anything from shifting metal to the sighs of long-dead civilizations. He kept his senses sharp, listening, watching, and testing the ground ahead. Hours passed as he navigated the ruined cityscape. Most structures were hollowed shells, some taller than a dozen human stories. Others collapsed into piles of rubble. Kalen used them for temporary shelter, climbing into a half-collapsed tower to rest. Inside, he found traces of the past, faded markings on walls, broken machines, and containers of preserved rations left behind by whoever had once occupied the place. These were not weak people, Kalen thought quietly. They built all of this, yet it fell. But I will not fall. He used the tools he carried to secure a small platform in the tower, fashioning a place to rest off the ground. It was not comfortable, but it was safe. He spent the evening studying the ruins, making notes in his mind of where traps might hide, where resources might be found, and how the land might protect or endanger him. The first night in the dead zone was long. Wind whipped through broken windows and doorways, carrying dust and the occasional sound of distant movement. Kalen stayed alert, relying on instinct honed from years in the military. When a small scavenger creature, a strange mix of insect and reptile, scuttled near his camp, he did not panic. Instead, he observed it, learned its patterns, and waited until it passed before continuing. By morning, he had a basic routine. He moved slowly, scanning for food, water, and signs of danger. He learned to drink from small streams, filtering the water carefully. Shh! The dead zone stretched endlessly before Kalen, a wasteland of jagged rocks, broken towers, and rusting machines that had not moved for centuries. Yet the sentinel he had discovered was different. It was alive, or at least it could be made to live. The soft hum of its systems pulsed beneath him like a heartbeat, and Kalen felt a strange connection forming, not just with the machine, but with the power it represented. He spent hours each day testing its movements. A slight touch on one of its massive limbs sent a response through hydraulics and circuits. He discovered patterns in its ancient programming, gestures that triggered lights, motions that activated sensors, sequences that powered dormant systems. Slowly, he began to understand it. Unlike the Empire's machines, which obeyed commands without thought, this sentinel required understanding, reasoning, and adaptability, qualities that matched Kalen's own human ingenuity. Not just muscle, Kalen muttered aloud. It needs thought. It needs strategy. It needs me. The first time he moved its arm deliberately, he barely controlled it. A wave of metal slammed against the ground, sending debris scattering across the ruins. But he adapted. Step by step, motion by motion, he learned to guide the sentinel with precision. By adjusting pressure, timing, and movement, he discovered that control came not from strength, but from balance and observation, skills humans excelled at despite their smaller frames. One evening, as twin moons rose over the dead zone, the sentinel made a strange sound, a low vibration from deep within its core. Kalen froze. Machines did not speak, yet this one seemed to. He placed his hand over its control panel, feeling warmth spreading through its metal. The hum intensified, almost as if it were acknowledging him. "You're alive," he whispered, "and you're trusting me." That night, Kalen slept atop the sentinel, using it as shelter against the acid winds that blew across the valley. In his dreams, the machine seemed to move with him, responding to his intentions, guiding him through ruins and storms as if it had a mind of its own. He awoke with renewed purpose. Over the next several days, Kalen explored deeper into the dead zone, testing the sentinel's abilities. Its sensors could detect movement at great distances. Its legs could cross broken terrain that humans could not navigate, and its onboard systems could repair minor damage automatically. Yet it was not a tool, it was a partner. The sentinel required Kalen's intuition, creativity, and decisions. Together they could accomplish what neither could alone. During one excursion, Kalen discovered a narrow canyon filled with strange, glowing crystals. The terrain was treacherous, the ground unstable, and jagged shards threatened to pierce the sentinel's hull. But with careful planning, Kalen guided it step by step, adjusting balance, shifting weight, and predicting where the crystals would break or crumble. The machine followed perfectly, moving as if it understood his thoughts. When they reached the canyon's center, Kalen noticed remnants of an ancient energy source, still faintly glowing. He realized that if he could harness it, the sentinel's power would increase dramatically. Carefully, he climbed onto the energy core, adjusting circuits and rerouting power. Sparks flew and the machine shuddered, but then, with a roar that echoed across the valley, the sentinel fully awoke. Lights glowed from every joint and systems long thought dead hummed in harmony. Kalen stepped back and marveled at the transformation. "Now we are unstoppable," he said, though he did not speak boastfully. There was respect here, for the sentinel, for himself, and for the challenge they had overcome together. News of Kalen's awakening spread in unexpected ways. From hidden vantage points, alien scouts had observed him. The Empire had assumed he would perish long ago, but whispers began to circulate among soldiers and nobles. A human, alone, had revived a war machine from the dead zone. Some scoffed, some feared, and some wondered if the stories were true. Kalen, however, paid them no mind. His focus remained on survival, exploration, and understanding the power now at his command. He ventured further into the dead zone, discovering pockets of alien refugees who had escaped the Empire's conflicts or fled rogue raiders. Kalen offered assistance, not with authority or threat, but with guidance and protection. The Sentinel became more than a machine. It shielded them from storms, helped build shelter, and even carried supplies across dangerous terrain. In turn, Kalen taught the refugees how to survive, how to identify edible plants, how to filter water, and how to remain unseen when predators approached. Slowly, a community formed, bound not by rank or species but by necessity, trust, and respect. One night, as they gathered in a half-collapsed amphitheater, Kalen watched the humans and aliens interact. There were children, small and wary, laughing for the first time in years. The sentinel stood like a guardian beside him, its glowing sensors reflecting hope across the ruins. Kalen realized that this was more than survival. This was leadership. And unlike the Empire's generals who ruled with fear or tradition, Kalen led with intelligence, courage, and compassion. Yet, danger was never far. Rogue machines patrolled the dead zone, remnants of old wars programmed to attack intruders. Kalen anticipated this. He studied their patterns, using the Sentinel's sensors to detect movement from miles away. When an attack came, a group of half-functioning war drones, the battle was not about strength but strategy. Kalen guided the Sentinel, dodging attacks, luring enemies into traps among the ruins and disabling them without unnecessary destruction. The victory was complete, and the survivors cheered. For the first time, Kalen felt the weight of recognition. Not from the Empire, not from nobles or generals, but from those who had lived in fear. He was a human among aliens, yet he had earned respect not through intimidation, but through ingenuity and courage. Even Princess Vera's words echoed in his mind from the hall. "You are fragile. You will break," he smiled quietly. He had not broken. Not physically, not mentally, and not in spirit. Every challenge, every trial in the dead zone had strengthened him, proving that humans could thrive where others failed. Kalen knew that this was only the beginning. The Sentinel was powerful, but it was not invincible. The dead zone was vast, filled with dangers still unseen, and ancient machines that might awaken with less friendly intentions. But he also knew that humans could face the unknown and adapt, overcome, and prevail. For the first time since leaving the Empire, Kalen allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. He had walked into the unknown, faced ridicule and doubt, and discovered a power greater than any armor or weapon the Empire could offer. The Sentinel, awakened by his human ingenuity, was proof that strength came in many forms. Not just muscle, not just steel, but thought, courage, and will. As he settled beside the Sentinel that night, Kalen looked out over the glowing ruins. The wind carried faint whispers, echoes of the past, yet he no longer felt fear. Instead, he felt purpose. He had a mission beyond survival. To prove that humans were more than prey or cannon fodder, more than small and fragile creatures in a galaxy of giants. They were adaptable, resilient, and capable of greatness. And with the Sentinel at his side, Kalen would show the galaxy exactly what a human could achieve. The dead zone was harsh, dangerous, and full of unknowns. But Kalen was no longer just a soldier. He was a leader, a protector, and a human who had awakened the ancient power of the past. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring more tests. Perhaps greater challenges, perhaps even allies or enemies from the Empire. But Kalen welcomed them all. With courage, intelligence, and the strength of human ingenuity, he would face whatever came next, and he would not be alone. The human warborn had awoken, and the dead zone would never be the same again. The news traveled faster than the Empire's messengers could contain it. Rumors of a human surviving the dead zone and awakening a war sentinel from long-forgotten ruins reached the ears of Princess Vera. At first, she refused to believe them. How could a single human survive where the Empire's strongest soldiers had perished? How could a creature so small, so fragile, wield power greater than the greatest generals of the Empire? But the whispers would not die. Reports came from scouts who had glimpsed him across the jagged valleys, moving with the Sentinel beside him, guiding refugees and repelling rogue machines. The stories painted a picture that Vera could no longer ignore. Her pride and curiosity ignited. She would find him herself, not to humiliate him again, but to prove that these tales were lies. Accompanied by a small retinue of the Empire's finest soldiers, Vera left the comfort of her palace. The air of the dead zone hit her immediately, a mixture of dust, scorched metal, and a faint trace of ozone from ancient energy sources. Her soldiers hesitated, unfamiliar with terrain so harsh and unpredictable. Yet Vera pressed forward, her determination unshaken. Days passed as they navigated the broken landscapes. Acid storms raged, forcing the soldiers to take shelter. Jagged terrain slowed their progress, and rogue scavenger creatures attacked more than once. Still, Vera led with authority, though she could not hide her growing unease. She had always relied on her status, her army, and the Empire's technology to achieve victory. Here, those advantages mattered little. Finally, she caught sight of him. Kalen stood atop a ridge, his sentinel beside him. The machine's massive form glowed softly, sensors scanning the land like vigilant eyes. Around him were... The dead zone had become more than a desolate wasteland. Under Kalen's guidance, small pockets of survivors, humans and aliens alike, had formed a fragile community. Children laughed cautiously among the ruins. Adults learned survival skills, and the sentinel stood like a silent guardian, its sensors scanning for danger with unwavering precision. Kalen had proven himself, but the calm of the valley was only temporary. One morning, a distant tremor shook the ground. Kalen felt it through the soles of his boots before the humans or aliens noticed. He looked toward the horizon, eyes narrowing. The tremors grew stronger, and soon a low mechanical hum resonated through the valley. Rogue machines were not the only danger here. Something larger, older and far more organized had awakened. "They're coming," Kalen said to himself, his voice steady. "And this time we cannot hide." Reports from scouts confirmed his fear. From beyond the ruins, an army of ancient war machines had emerged. Machines built during the Dead Zone's long-forgotten wars, programmed for destruction, and now reactivated. They moved in formation, coordinated and relentless. Unlike the rogue scavengers Kalen had faced before, these machines were intelligent, adaptive, and lethal. Kalen gathered the survivors and explained the situation. "We cannot fight them as individuals," he said. "Strength alone will not save us. We must work together, think strategically, and use every advantage the land and our minds provide." The group listened, some skeptical, some fearful, but all aware that Kalen's words carried weight. He had proven himself already, reviving the Sentinel, protecting the vulnerable, and surviving the Dead Zone. If Kalen believed they could stand against this army, they would follow. Vera, standing beside him, had learned humility. She now recognized the human's abilities, not with envy but with respect. "What do you need from us?" she asked. Her voice was free of arrogance for the first time. "Your soldiers can help," Kalen replied, "but they must listen, not command. Everyone follows the plan and everyone protects one another. Fear will kill us faster than the machines ever could." For days, Kalen led the survivors in preparation. They studied the terrain, mapping choke points, collapsed structures, and areas where the machine's movement could be slowed. Traps were set using rubble, energy sources, and clever misdirection. Kalen taught the survivors to use the Sentinel strategically, not as a weapon of brute force, but as a tactical tool to block paths, lure enemies, and shield vulnerable groups. The humans and aliens adapted quickly. Kalen's guidance emphasized observation, creativity, and teamwork, qualities that the Empire often overlooked in favor of sheer power. Refugees who had once hidden in fear now moved with purpose, following Kalen's strategies with confidence. The Dead Zone itself became an ally, its dangers repurposed to protect rather than threaten. The first wave of machines arrived at dawn, their metallic forms glinting in the pale light. Kalen surveyed them carefully. The army was massive but disorganized when faced with terrain designed to slow them down. He signaled to the Sentinel, which moved forward with calculated steps, forcing the machines into narrow paths where their numbers meant less. The battle began. Clanking metal and energy discharges echoed across the ruins. Kalen's tactics were precise. Machines that could have crushed humans in moments were guided into traps, immobilized by debris, or led into ambushes where survivors disabled them with clever tools and energy pulses. Vera watched in awe as Kalen directed the fight, calmly assessing threats, adjusting strategies and moving where needed. His human mind anticipated the machine's patterns, predicting their movements before they acted. Unlike the Empire's rigid soldiers, Kalen adapted constantly, learning from every attack and using it to refine their defense. Hours passed. Machines fell, some destroyed entirely, others immobilized. But the army was vast, and Kalen knew they could not endure a prolonged battle without loss. He signaled a strategic retreat, drawing the machines toward a narrow canyon filled with jagged crystal formations. There, the terrain amplified their mistakes. Machines collided with sharp crystal edges, toppled over broken ground, and became easy targets for the survivors' defensive positions. The Sentinel moved at Kalen's side, protecting refugees, blocking attacks, and striking when necessary. Kalen himself led small groups to repair damaged defenses, assist injured allies, and guide machines into traps. Every action demonstrated the power of human ingenuity, courage, and adaptability. By nightfall, the majority of the attacking machines had been neutralized or destroyed. Survivors cheered quietly, not with arrogance but with relief and newfound confidence. Kalen surveyed the battlefield. The dead zone was scarred, but it had not defeated them. Humanity, guided by intelligence, courage, and teamwork, had turned the tide. Vera approached Kalen once more. "I see now," she said softly, "that strength is not just in muscle or armor or power. It is in thought and courage and in heart. You have shown me that, human." Kalen nodded, acknowledging her words without pride. "Strength is in everyone who chooses to act, to protect, and to survive. Today we all were strong." Over the next days, Kalen and the survivors repaired the ruins, fortified defenses, and prepared for any future threats. Word of the human warborn's deeds began to spread, even reaching distant parts of the Empire. For the first time, humans were seen as capable allies and leaders, not weak or expendable soldiers. Kalen continued to lead, teaching the refugees not only survival, but resilience, strategy, and courage. His actions inspired confidence not just in humans but in aliens who had witnessed his abilities firsthand. The Dead Zone, once a place of despair, had become a proving ground for human potential. Even Princess Vera, humbled by what she had seen, now worked alongside Kalen. She offered her knowledge of Empire tactics and technology, learning from him in return. Together they demonstrated that collaboration, humility, and respect could achieve what pride and arrogance never could. Kalen's journey in the Dead Zone had begun with mockery, ridicule, and doubt. But through courage, ingenuity, and determination, he had transformed a hostile land into a stronghold, united humans and aliens, and faced an army that many thought would destroy them all. The horizon remained dangerous. The Dead Zone was vast, and unknown threats could emerge at any time. But Kalen had proven something vital. Humans, underestimated and overlooked, could survive, adapt, and lead against impossible odds. He had awakened not only the Sentinel, but the potential of humanity itself, a force that no empire or enemy could easily ignore. As the twin moons rose over the repaired ruins, Kalen stood atop the Sentinel, surveying the valley. The survivors gathered below, tired but safe. He allowed himself a quiet moment of reflection. The Empire had mocked him, the princess had doubted him, but here, in the harshest of worlds, humans had shown their true strength. Kalen whispered to himself, "The Dead Zone has tested us and we have endured. Tomorrow, whatever comes, we will face it, together." And with that, the human warborn prepared for the next challenge, knowing that the true test of courage, intelligence, and heart was only beginning. The Dead Zone was quiet now, but Kalen knew that peace was only temporary. The scattered attacks of rogue machines and remnants of ancient armies had revealed a truth. The Dead Zone was not a forgotten place. It was a proving ground. Somewhere beyond the jagged mountains, a greater force waited, something older and more dangerous than anything he had faced. Kalen stood atop the Sentinel, surveying the horizon. Its massive frame hummed with energy, a living machine responsive to his every thought and command. Around him, humans and aliens worked side by side, repairing defenses, sharing knowledge, and preparing for the inevitable. The community he had built was strong, disciplined, and ready, not because they had been forced, but because they had chosen to trust him. "Kalen," Vera said, her voice steady now, free of the pride that once blinded her. "The scouts report an incoming force. Thousands of machines, far larger and more organized than before. They are heading straight for the valley." Kalen nodded. He had anticipated this. The machines were ancient war constructs programmed with one purpose: destruction. But he had something no machine could predict: human ingenuity. Every strategy he had developed, every lesson learned in the Dead Zone was a tool in this battle. He called the survivors together. "Today we fight not just for survival," he said, his voice carrying across the valley. "We fight to prove that humanity, and those who stand with us are not weak. We fight to show that courage, intelligence, and heart are stronger than steel, faster than any machine, and wiser than any programming. Stand with me and we will endure. The group nodded, their faces filled with determination. Vera and her soldiers stood among them, no longer superior or dismissive, but equal. The lesson of humility had been learned, and respect had replaced arrogance. As the first shadows of the approaching army appeared on the horizon, Kalen directed the formation. Refugees and soldiers took positions behind natural barriers, using the terrain to their advantage. The sentinel moved at the front, its massive limbs ready to block, deflect, and strike. Kalen coordinated everything with precision, guiding his allies like pieces on a vast battlefield. The machines reached the valley as the sun rose. A deep mechanical roar echoed across the dead zone. But Kalen's forces, we